in English, and he became so powerful that he wore on his finger the seal of royal authority. Discovering Joseph's seal at Avaris would prove that the Israelites arrived here exactly when our timeline predicts. That would be like finding a needle in a 3,700-year-old archaeological haystack. Incredibly, the tiny seal was found, precisely at the archaeological layer we anticipated. In fact, Professor Manfred Bitak found no less than 9 seals worn by Joseph's court officials. Inscribed right on them is the Hebrew name Yaakov, Joseph's father.
It's very strange that we found 9 seals with the name Jacob here. It's a biblical name, by the way. The original was probably mounted on a ring worn on the finger, and this gives us a new puzzle.
Is it really a puzzle? Not if one uses our chronology. This is the only time that a Hebrew name appears on an Egyptian royal seal. It directly connects Avaris with the Bible, but Professor Bitak steers clear of biblical chronology. He's under the constant watch of the Egyptian Antiquities Authority, who have made Avaris off limits to the public. Supposedly for conservation reasons, Professor Bitak has been forced to cover up his dig every single year. The area is then plowed, seeded, and cultivated by local farmers. No one would suspect that underneath these fields lies an archaeological treasure trove that proves the biblical Exodus. Now that we found hard evidence for the arrival of the Israelites in Egypt and their rise to power, we went searching for archaeological proof of their downfall and the slavery that led to the Exodus. In search of the evidence, we had to travel to a place called Serabit El Khadim, 400 kilometers south of the Nile Delta into the Sinai Desert. For thousands of years, Egyptians mined turquoise in this area. Often they used slave labor. The ancient turquoise mines are off the beaten tourist track. The only ones who know their way in this area are the Bedouins, who still live at the foot of the mines.
I heard once that the Bedouin, they can do like the Prophet Musa, that they know which rocks have water in them. They break it. Is that true?
We got here, paid our respects to the local sheikh, and recruited one of his sons to show us the way.
Okay, let's go.
We learned of this place from old papers published in obscure journals. We came here to find proof of the slaves that Moses led to freedom. But even if we found evidence for the presence of slaves, how could we be sure that they were Israelites? The Bible provides us with 2 clues. First, the followers of Moses did not use hieroglyphic writing like the Egyptians. Rather, the biblical tradition states that they used an early form of alphabetic writing. Also, the Israelites did not worship Egyptian gods, but a single God that the Bible calls El. To support our new biblical timeline, we needed to find alphabetic inscriptions carved by slaves some 3,500 years ago. In our wildest dreams, they would also mention the biblical God. El. And sure enough, there are slave inscriptions here, and one of them records a 3,500-year-old cry. El, save me. This is the writing of a slave who worked in this mine. You can still see the chisel marks, which were part of the forced labor that the author of this inscription was involved in. And he wrote his cry to God, saying, help me, don't forget me, here where he worked and he slept and he probably died. And it represents an incredible moment in human history. Not only is it the first inscription that records the name of God, El, but it also records the oldest, or maybe the second oldest, alphabetic inscription. It's the basis on which Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, Latin, English, Arabic, all is based on this writing. Pretty incredible that after all these years we would be here to record this man's cry. Yachmos' stela, the Beni Hassan tomb paintings, Joseph's royal seal, and the Israelite slavery inscriptions all point to approximately 1500 BCE as the date for Moses and the Exodus. If our date is correct, then there's something else that we have to factor in. Around 1500 BCE, people living along the Mediterranean experienced one of the most cataclysmic events in history, the eruption of the Santorini volcano in modern Greece. This eruption may be another crucial clue for decoding the biblical Exodus. This is the island of Santorini, 700 kilometers from the Egyptian coast across the Mediterranean. It is literally the mouth of a volcano. Some 3,500 years ago, Santorini was destroyed by one of the worst volcanic eruptions in human history. When it erupted, the volcano essentially brought to an end the Minoan civilization that once flourished here. It sent an ash cloud that measured some 40 kilometers straight up and 200 kilometers across. The sound of the eruption circled the Earth some 10 to 12 times.
To put this in perspective, an eruption like Santorini would be hundreds to thousands of times stronger, more explosive than the atom bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. The energy of that eruption was so immense, you would have had these huge explosions that were happening, and you'd hear crack, crack, crack. For hundreds of kilometers, people around were listening to it. We were getting earthquakes, probably magnitude 3, 4, maybe even 5 or higher, that were happening extremely rapidly. And it would have been, I'm sure, to the people living there as if the world was coming to an end.
So perhaps the cataclysmic events described in the Bible, such as plagues, darkness, and the parting of a sea, are somehow connected to the Santorini eruption. But like all things related to the Exodus, dating the Santorini eruption to 1500 BCE can be controversial.
People have been arguing about the dates of Santorini. Volcanologists and geologists would date the eruption in the 1600s BC. Archaeologists tend to date it in the 1500s BC.
Digging at Avaris, Professor Bitak has no doubt that he can pinpoint the Santorini eruption to the exact time period where we place the Exodus.
Here, pumice from the Santorini eruption appears for the first time. So from archaeological point of view, it looks very much as if the eruption happened early in the 18th dynasty, let us say around 1500 BC.
Yakubovich's chronology machine has now synchronized